You're watching Press Pass. We're about to discuss the coverage of the 14 Riverside Drive complex attack. It does not escape our minds as we continue with this conversation, the grief and the pain it has caused many family members and friends, and indeed the country. At least 21 people were killed, tens others injured, and even the over 700 who were rescued will need counseling. We take a moment to pay tribute to those who passed on. Our condolences to their families and friends, and quick recovery to those receiving treatment. So far, more than 15 people have been arrested and 30 others interrogated over the terror attack. But first, this is why we are having this conversation tonight.
These are the reports we're receiving of an explosion and gunshots along Riverside Drive.
How were you? What happened? What can you describe to us? Your name first, of course.
The siege is over.
We review the coverage of the 14 Riverside attack and have a candid take on the work of the Fourth Estate.
I want to commend them for keeping their ethics during the airing of the same and the coverage of the attack.
I will give them 85%.
And we also give you your take as we asked you, and you answered, of course, on how you felt the Fourth Estate performed in its coverage of the attack. I'm glad to have a good panel here, a panel who are experienced in the topic of conversation tonight. And right to my far left, I have Josephine Karani, first time to have her on the show. Thank you for joining us this evening. She is the chairperson of the International Association of Women in Radio and Television, the Kenyan chapter. Next to her is John Gashia, a veteran journalist who has also been and is a consultant on matters security and, in course, for the Fourth Estate, to be specific. And next to me is the CEO of the Media Council of Kenya, that is David Omoyo. Thank you for joining me, sir and ladies. And of course, I was meant to have Tommy Oladipo, the Africa security correspondent at the BBC. Now, just to be very clear, that Tommy Oladipo was very willing to come on this show. He has been on this show before, and in the last minute, rather earlier this evening, his boss saw it fit that he sits this one out. Things are very sensitive at the moment, and just before KOT bays for his blood, let me show you who Tommy Oladipo is, if you could get a screen grab of what I'm looking at. He is one of the reporters that were on the front line immediately after the attack and were actually helping out with the rescue operation. He put down his camera, put down his mic, and helped rescue those who were injured. That's him in the jacket there, written, indicated press, and with the safety helmet. So yes, this is one of the reporters who were to give us an experience, and also coming from the BBC, who are very well planned in terms of their response to such situations. So before KOT responds and bays for his blood, it is not on him, it is on his seniors who saw it fit not to attend this very sensitive conversation. And Bwana Omoyo will tell us where we are right now, because the very sensitive one, and in fact some people are saying we're overreacting, was what the New York Times had published and your response to them. First of all, it was KOT's response to them, and then you picked up, and definitely as the watchdog, you had one or two things to say. Where are we at this moment with that?
We, of course, wrote to the New York Times. They responded to us on Twitter and on their website. We wrote back because we did not agree with certain aspects of their response. And at this point, they have written back to us, and with a special request that we don't publish their request. Tomorrow evening, we have a meeting, a conference call between my senior management team and the senior management and the New York Times to discuss the next course of action. They requested for a meeting to discuss the issue before we take any other action.
All right, let me just have the other panelists give their take on this. Was this an overreaction? I'll start with you, Josephine. In terms of what happened, the Daily Nation not too long ago with the Westgate attack, there was also a very horrific picture. We retracted, we apologized with the CEO then. What's your take on this one?
I think for me on this one, if I was to compare the coverage during Westgate and Dusit D2, it was quite, there's improvement on the approach that journalists and even the security, all the people went out there to do various things. They did it better than it happened in Westgate. The response was quick. They were cautious. And I think it was quite improved as compared to last time. Of course, yes, the picture that was on Nation during the time of Westgate, I remember there was outcry from across the public, and the Nation pulled it down and actually apologized. And that is why I would like to hear more from Mr. Moyo on how the New York Times will deal with people pushing them to pull down the pictures that are not very good.
Because as we speak, the article is still there and the picture is still there. I can't show it because it will probably be propagating the same thing that we're criticizing. Mr. John Gashie, from your standpoint, are we overreacting?
Thank you, Mark. Let's perhaps put the whole thing in context that the business of media is is not to cause harm. So, and the other business of media is to tell the story in its context, and also to be accurate and balanced. And it's not the business of the media, therefore, to perhaps exacerbate a situation and pretend that the media operates in a vacuum.
Okay.
So in this context, the issue of the Media Council, and indeed how the international media covered, and usually how they do cover acts of violence elsewhere in relation to what they do, say, when we have an attack in London, in Paris, in New York, and in what have you. Right. It's in my view very, to a large extent, very insensitive, and also perhaps it's informed by what we call, and I could be wrong here, but I think it could be informed by what they call a little bit of a racist attitude that Africa or elsewhere, if Africans are dying, it's a normal thing. So, but having said that, a lot of the international media institutions have, and specifically the BBC for that matter, have a fairly very developed code of conduct that talks about you as a media serving the public interest without causing distress, without causing harm to your viewers and even the victims. Okay. And indeed, then you are entitled to be able to do that, but be careful and be sensitive.
Right. And on the point of sensitivity, and they try to explain this in an article, and many will ask, you didn't give them right of reply to invite the New York Times. I did. In fact, the journalist in question, and she also opted out, and with respect, we cannot force her. It is a sensitive issue that Omoyo says they are dealing with, and will give us the closing remarks on this particular issue. And I also invited the Foreign Correspondents Association representatives, and none of the board members were available for this conversation. So the opportunity was offered, and they opted to sit this one out. But in terms of right of reply, one of the articles that we're trying to explain, and if you can look at what I'm looking at here, why the Times published a disturbing photo of dead bodies after an attack in Nairobi. In fact, this is what one of the editors sent back to me when I was requesting their presence in this conversation. Now, in one of the, and you can respond to this real quick, the publication of graphic images is never taken lightly at the Times. Many people across the newsroom are involved in difficult conversations, weighing the desire to be sensitive, you mentioned that, and respectful of victims and their families, with our mission to give readers a clear view of what's happening in the world. Omoyo, to this particular issue, a clear view, a clear picture of what is happening.
Well, that is true. I have to note that in the past 14 months that I started the Media Council, we only wrote 3 times to media about what they did, twice to local media houses and once to the international media. And in both cases, all the local media houses responded and retracted when we needed that done. This was a case where 2 hours after the attack, while families are scrambling up and down looking for loved ones, you post images of dead bodies. I mean, that was extremely insensitive. And even our first rating to them was that, please just pull this down. Families are grieving and people can identify relatives and all that. And so, initially, we need to know that initially, the New York Times attempted to apologize. Yeah. Then later on, they went back and recorded the apology and all that. And our issue was be sensitive to the families. We haven't traced some of our loved ones. And the code of conduct, either the International Society of Journalists in the US or the Kenyan Code of Conduct, where your correspondent or subscribed, is that you will be sensitive. Don't publish these images unless it is necessary. But specifically around this one, if we had, for example, government saying there are no dead people in the attack, then you can say we will publish dead bodies to show that government is lying. Or if government is saying we have 10 dead people and your photos of 20 bodies, you can do that. So these photos
publish the 20 bodies?
Yes, so that you are contesting. You know, the photos are showing
then where
an additional.
Does the issue of sensitivity come in?
Number one, if you're talking about journalists or the media is trying to show the reality, then the photo should show that we are publishing this to contest the position.
And that's what they were arguing. They were saying they wanted to give a clear view of what's happening.
But they have already been told that we have 21 people dead. So you don't have to lie in their bodies to prove that. But if you say there is nobody dead, then the media can say government is lying, we have bodies to prove. But here we are not. So the photos did not add anything to the story. There was nothing new added to the story. It was just to just really push the affected families, and it was just being unreasonable.
Okay, Josephine, and then Banagashi.
Yeah, I think very unfair to show body parts, to show dead people. Did it make the story more believable? Couldn't this story have been told even by mentioning that, yes, we've lost 21 people? I had a problem with it because of the immediacy. It's just that this has happened. Some people have died in a cafeteria. And the next thing, is that the best picture to show? I wouldn't mind if we saw burning cars. Well, we can have our imagination, but should you show bodies so that now people can really believe, yes, this has happened? Well, I know it's a very thin line between showing picture, because also there is access to information, which is a right.
Yes.
At Code 35, people have a right to information held by the state or what is happening around, but you really have to balance between showing, if showing will help more, or if it will even bring more grief to the family. It's unfair because, you see, I know my family member works at that area, and naturally if I just see dead bodies, I'll start imagining that could be so and so.
Start imagining
so I think it was
the
not
worst.
right. Yeah.
All right. Wanagashia, to this issue of sensitivity, showing the clear picture.
The New York Times can perhaps claim as much as they want that they wanted to set the record straight, but they're being, they are covering up for what I call sensationalism, and also lack of respect for the victims, because the victims are Africans, the victims are in Nairobi. Indeed, the New York Times, the BBC, the Voice of America, and name it. Once we have a terrorist attack in New York, in London, in Paris, they are, by code, by law, and indeed by fair journalism, very careful about showing graphic material, because they are indeed have to show and cause no harm. And therefore, for them to say that they were doing this to try and set the record straight, and as my colleague here was saying, you're engaging in what we call double speak here. And indeed, it is unprofessional. And as my colleague was talking about, from the Media Council, the American Code of Journalism, in terms of showing sensitivity to the victims, to the family, and what have you, does call for very sensitive handling of that kind of a situation.
And this is the same measure of an expectation for local media, international media, all over. All right. And this is something I'd like to read, of course, in terms of giving right of reply, in some of the concluding paragraphs of that article trying to explain. And they say, this is Lacey, as a result of the concerns from our readers that this photo raised, we're going to convene a group of people to come up with clearer guidelines. I'm going to be part of that effort. And as part of this process, we will create a set of questions to consider before publishing sensitive images, and we must weigh our responsibility as journalists to help our readers see and understand the reality of the world with sensitivity to the victims and their families. We take both of these responsibilities very seriously. Bonomoyo has said that they are in talks with them. Just to understand from a Kenyan perspective, many of those, especially on KOT, what they've wanted to see is the offices closed down. But is that really the end that you would desire to see? Or what would be the issue, or what would read as a lesson learned, and we're going to better our practice?
You know, the New York Times shouldn't just necessarily play victim.
Okay.
And play to the gallery so that they look like Kenya is harassing and we are just anti-press freedom. We have just asked them to pull down images of dead people, especially noting that they were posted while the attack was ongoing. And from my perspective, thinking that I know who the bodies are, I saw the families on TV saying we need to find out where our people are. Okay. So these photos were posted 2 hours before we saw their families on TV, in another TV station saying, please tell us where our people were. That is very insensitive. Number two, they are lying to you by saying that we are going to convene a team to look at the sensitivity. It already exists in a code. They're actually required to not to play to the gallery and to be sensitive to people's feelings and cultures. And all we told them, pull down the photo, leave, don't mess with the story, don't change with your numbers. The photo does not add any value to the story. So by pretending to convene a team, yeah, they already have a code that talks about sensitivities and all that. They are simply playing, they're not being honest. That's the problem, is that.
All right.
Yes.
And to be fair, also the Foreign Association of Correspondents had an appeal that there are no personal attacks on the said journalist whose the picture was attached to her story, and that is Kimiko, and that is the only desire and request to the Media Council and the rest of Kenyans. You'll tell us where this gets to and where this ends in terms of moving forward and learning from our mistakes. I'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll hear from Kenyans now what they felt was the job done by Kenyan media, so that we can look at what we can learn from in terms of this coverage.
The media are doing a good work, especially for awareness to our people of what is happening. Because most people, when that thing was happening, people were at work, others were traveling and they didn't know what was happening.
I want to commend them for keeping their ethics during the airing of the same and the coverage of the attack. Save to point out that there were some media stations which would interview those people who are coming out of the building. And I know those people are going through some trauma, and therefore they should have been left to safety instead of being interviewed immediately after the attack.
The media are not like those who take images on phone. When you take on phone, you don't edit, you don't know what is right, you can't balance information. But the media gives us well-informed, makes us well-informed, they give us precise information. And I want to say, if it is not for the media, it will be very difficult to get credible and reliable information that will help Kenyans to know what exactly is happening.
In future, it is important to have the key areas captured, but not the terrible scenes which affect individuals.
At some point we saw your reporters doing good work in moving casualties to safety. We saw them helping those who had been injured in the incident to be taken to hospitals through ambulance and all that.
This time around, it is not like the other time when we had an attack and there was too much information out there to everyone. So I must applaud the editors who were saving the information. However, I also believe that the media needed more support, especially from our security agencies, by giving them timely information so that we don't have a vacuum. At one point I felt there was a vacuum of information in terms of the progress of the whole operation.
There was concern around how it was done because being a live coverage, we could see that some operational details of the security operation were being beamed live, and now you see this poses a challenge, especially it compromises the operation, especially now that we are in a technology age where some of these terrorists could take advantage and use it to reorganize and maybe change their tactical terrorist strategies that they were applying to do the attack.
Ile coverage ambayo imechukuliwa na media ni nzuri sana. Manake kama hawangelifanya hivyo basi wengi hawangelijua kunaendelea nini Kenya. Kwa hivyo media ilifanya kazi nzuri, manake hata wengi walipata kufika kwenye lile tukio na wengi walipata jamaa zao wako pale. Ilisaidia kwa upande mwingine, ilisaidia sana.
I will give them 85% considering in terms of the attack. Once the people were devastated or were out of the building, there are certain questions which were asked by certain media houses which were not they were jumping the gun at that moment because the people were devastated, people were scared, asking questions of what was transpiring inside the house. I don't think that was good at that time.
I believe local media is supposed to show the best part of Kenya or the best about our country, and I believe it is a balance of whether you want to give the truth and the whole truth or whether you want to save face. So
lakini kama ingelikuwa ni maneno peke yake bila kuonyesha zile picha, nafikiri ingelikuwa haina uzito na mtu hangelifeel. Kwa hivyo vile ambayo ilionyeshwa picha na maneno pia yanafuatizia nyuma yake, basi watu walipata kujua kweli kitu hiki kinatendeka na kiko mahali fulani.
We want to encourage the media to do as they've been doing, to show the positive parts of the successes in Kenya, and show the world that we as Kenya are standing strong despite the attacks by the enemy.
If we say we are strong and we are not strong, it's like we are praising this Al-Shabaab because we are giving them a chance. We are telling them we are strong. Next time they come again, we are strong. Are we really strong? Let's see the underlying issues. Let's see the loopholes in our security. We need to at least eat at the government so that they can rectify.
It's not really good, and whereas we want to balance the issues of informing the public versus also the security and managing the psychology of the state, we should know that the whole nation is traumatized. Therefore, when you become part of that, and as I said earlier, then you become, without knowing, part of the conduits who are spreading the message of terror and now helping the terrorists to achieve their objectives.
Some very good takes from around the country. Thank you for that. And just some quick responses as you listen to that. There is some themes there. There's a patriotic issue. There's the issue of actually pushing the government to give more answers on where the loopholes were. But let's start from the breaking news, from the point it broke. What did you feel? How did you feel we treated this particular story? From all media houses, whichever station you saw with a good job or bad job, just say it.
I think this time, like I said earlier on, Mark, it was better than the other time, Westgate and the other attacks. I think it's like we've learned, or media has learned through the times, and they did it better this time. There was some sort of consistency. There were no scoops. I think sometimes scoops mess up things. The rush to be the one to break the news, and maybe you want to quickly say things you have not verified. But I even watched The Nation, and I thought it came slowly. At first, nobody knew whether it was a terrorist attack
or robbery
or what it was. I even read on social media that there's a gunfire at Kileleshwa. Don't go that way. I thought maybe it's some robbery or something. But slowly, as it unfolded, then we started understanding the whole process. But I think this time I must laud the media, the way they approached the whole coverage. It was quite well done compared to the past.
Something that came out from a Baringo resident there, and I saw you jotting down something, the tactical maneuvers. At any one point, did you see that being given away with the live wall-to-wall coverage initially when we started?
I was worried that something of that nature could happen. And I think that is the issue, that perhaps what live coverage of an ongoing incident, in terms specifically if it's a terrorist attack, the impact that could have, because the terrorists themselves could also be having what we call a mind out there.
Yes.
And indeed, with the advent of digital technology, and the Al-Shabaab and a lot of the terrorists are fairly adept, if not better, perhaps at times, better at making use of technology to aid their actions. So you are a little worried about that. But I might say this, that what my fellow panelist is saying, the performance at this particular time of the Kenyan media, I would say, like somebody said out there, I wouldn't go as much as giving you 85%. I would still be stingy a little, but I would say this: the Kenyan media at this particular time was, I would say, level-headed.
Okay.
And I think the key issue here is that they were level-headed. They did not want to antagonize. That's one. They did not want to make the situation either worse, and they did not want to rush into judgment. Okay. And I think that is what we call a level-headed news coverage over a developing event. Now, having said that, I also saw that perhaps the security, in this particular instance, the response was fairly well coordinated. So right across all the variables that were at play, the media, the security, and the gatekeeping aspect within this house, the standard, the citizen, I think because of what you had learned and the kind of issues that you'd come across because of knowing how not to play into the hands of the terrorists. Okay. I think there was a lot of responsibility. Oh. So would I say then I would deduct 85 and give you 75? Oh, but that perhaps having happened during the Westgate, when you really were, you really got less than 45%. Right. But for me, it was a very good show of the professionalism within the media, and you are sensitive.
Right.
Sensitive to the national good, and also trauma, and not to playing to that.
And we weren't too quick to scoop, as you say, but increasingly we were really trying to catch the story, to get the best pictures, and this is just one of the examples. It's actually from Sky. This was initially as the story was starting.
Well, we had a very good collaboration generally, and a fair flow of information. At some point, journalists went too far. I remember long ago when I was in journalism school, we were told that no story is worth dying for. And here we are seeing literally people squeezing with the police, special forces and all that. I think that is going a little too far. Yes. It's about really balancing, to just break the news, but let's allow the operations to go on and all that.
And I know you have concerns about security,
Yes.
and I'll start. Let me start with Josephine. As you watch such clips, and you know, at this point, actually, what we're watching here, these are the security officials running out because they had sighted or seen a grenade. Yeah, at this point, they were just trying to scour and clear the room, and they just spotted a grenade here, and they were running out. And you know, you could imagine the worst. But you know, your concerns in this.
Yes, for me, again, once more, security of those who are not within the building. There is this tendency of Kenyans running towards where there is danger, and I liked the way there were announcements that keep away from that area, because that way then it brings a lot of confusion from the parties that are trying to save people. But I think also journalists and anybody who was around that area needed to also first take care of their own security. I saw many news crews without even a helmet, yes, or even with a jacket. I think that is very crucial, that you have to take care of yourself first before you take care of others. The way they say when you've gotten into a plane, make sure you put on your mask before you assist others. Yes. So I think there need to be that caution and care. Yes. And probably, I think now when I look at this, I think journalists need more training on safety of journalists, because, and this includes men and women. And in IWAT, actually, we do some education on safety of women journalists, because women are more vulnerable naturally, of course. So I think there needs to be more lessons on how to cover yourself during such an attack. Because, yes, yeah.
As much as you speak to the journalists, you should also speak to the bosses, because true, as witness to this, in the newsroom, when this yes, broke, it was get to the scene, yeah, establish what's happening, yes, then we will send whatever else is needed. And it's unfortunate we don't have Tommy Oladipo from BBC, because I know the advantage to have a protocol that they follow before you go to such or respond to such.
Mark, let me say this. The media owners, the journalists, and also your gatekeepers, the editors themselves, cannot, and on the basis of getting the story, put your journalist into area where their safety is a threat.
Yes.
And indeed, the standard best practice worldwide is that I would like to imagine that the nation should have what we call SOP, standard operating procedures, that determine that in a situation of a riot, disaster, terrorist attack, and what have you, as we are still doing this, there are certain issues that must be in place. What is that? That, as a continuous aspect, journalists need to be trained on how to own their safety. That's one. Two, the journalists, there must be equal and appropriate kitting. Indeed, in terms of situation, bulletproof vests and what have you. It is not by mistake that the international media people who were out there as a basic business practice, that they do provide their journalists with a protective kit and care. So, should then, as my colleague here was talking about, it's not about scooping, because the problem is, and perhaps I'll bring it home to the nation, in terms of scooping, you had one of yours, one of your own.
Yes.
Yes.
And I thought that if there was at any one time that the Kenyan journalists needed to appreciate that journalists are not supermen, journalists are not immune to being, killed, targeted, and taken. Apollo, is called Apollo?
Yes, Silas Apollo.
Silas Apollo, and Dixon.
Yes.
And indeed, I think for the first time, it got home to the nation that as you are doing this, the person that you know, one of yours, could be a victim. And indeed, how would you explain that?
Right.
And you cannot explain that. Is there basic standard procedures here that determine in a situation like this, we will go get the story, but at the same time, as my colleague from the Media Council is saying, any editor who tells you that there's a story worth your life, I think he is really being, I would say, very unprofessional.
They wouldn't say that, but how it plays out, and you know this, it breaks. You're told, get there as we establish what is happening. and will send more, you know, whether it's recruitment or equipment to you. So that's what really plays out realistically in our media houses.
Yes, but really I think if you have the standard operating procedures, you are going to an active shooting scene, you don't need to go and come for your vest later. As long as there's an active shooting going on,
yes,
whether it is children playing or anything, as long as there are bullets flying,
yes,
you don't need to leave any of your safety equipment behind.
Right.
And number two, I think, and this is where, well, I commend that the government did a rather good job, that is usually a line that is established around a scene, so that we have now a line beyond which nobody goes. Then that was lacking, I think, because of the speed. And we, maybe the guys coming in immediately were concerned about responding.
Yes.
There is a line that is so that then people stay there. But then it's further now the duty of the security agencies to make sure that there is someone providing a brief to the media regularly. Like we would say, at every top of the hour, I'll come and give you a brief and all that. So don't cross, because in the absence of that line is where we have guys, journalists and the police, the security guys, going and getting a grenade and running away, both of them. We shouldn't get that. We should really be able to get a report, because if then it explodes and you are told we had the police and civilians who are being saved and cameramen who had followed the police in,
yes,
it will sound extremely embarrassing. And all
what
that.
of the take on, this was relayed in one of the opinions there, getting the views from the survivors or those who are walking out of that scene? What guides us?
We have, the code of conduct speaks to that very clearly, about being sensitive, don't disclose too much, and be sensitive to the distressed guys who are just coming out and all that. So yes, you want to scoop, but the guys who have just run out, and I remember one journalist was being interviewed by another journalist. I told him, yes, I am a journalist also, guy. I can't tell you what is happening in there because something is happening. So there is about, yes, you want to scoop, but at least be reasonable. And the code of conduct speaks to that a lot. These are not rules and regulations, really. It's something to draw your attention, your moral mentality and all that, that just be reasonable. You don't get a person who has just escaped a bullet to ask them, so what do you feel and what is happening in there? So you may want to skip, but it's about really reasoning and all that. And that goes back to continuous training.
Okay.
And letting people really internalize the implications. When you see people just jumping out of a building, I saw a very distressing woman of a woman jumping out of a window and people trying to hold and all that. You don't wait for her down here with a microphone and tell her, so what is happening in there? You know, you're simply being unfair. So
be human.
Yes, just
it's called intrusion
to
grief. And I think the code has that very, it is very clear that you cannot, I think it would be at the height. And I think, again, it's a question of training. It's a question of standard operating procedures. And as you said, she said about the scooping. You see, nation must just scoop. I must admit that, and the citizen. But I think, turn it round. What if it was your Apollo? And somebody, and I remember one of your people, they were asking Apollo to tell them their experiences. And I thought, that can't happen.
Even if they checked with Apollo that he's okay to speak.
But you don't do that.
Okay.
Because you see, Apollo is a journalist, but he's a human being.
Yes, he was traumatized.
And you cannot go there just to try to get a scoop. You're just being very insensitive.
Okay, and you want to say?
Just like what Mr. Moyo said about either hourly reports or briefs, they were lacking. I was a viewer at home, and it took so long for the CS to now, or even the police to come. So that's why Kenyans filled in the gaps. They even became comical on some issues. And there was even this name of somebody which was circulating that if you have someone in there and you need them to be helped, talk to so-and-so, and they even gave the number. Later it was said this was fake.
It was a wrong number.
And actually that's where the police or the forces or the government needed to have some clear guidelines and say, look, if you have anybody you want to be assisted who is in there, who has called you, this is the person to reach and this is their number.
So there also needs to be a collaboration also from the media and the security forces in how to respond and rescue people as this continues to unfold.
Yes.
And just to give credit to some of the colleagues who put down their cameras, put down their mics and decided, hey, we're going to help people, and this is one of them, the gentleman who was meant to be here with us. This is Tommy Oladipo, captured on the Star. This is Terra in Nairobi, and this is where we're going to right now in terms terms of just getting to understand if we goofed as well in the headlining. And because there was that by the Star, terror in Nairobi, and then we had others, we were really criticized, that is the Nation Inside Hotel of Terror, and the People Daily, Kenya Unbowed, and they were praised for this, and the Standard, Terror in the City. Why would you say People Daily, Kenya Unbowed the following day was the best?
It was soft. It gave the story all right. But you know, when you see terror in the city, terror inside a hotel, already it's like it gives you a picture of horrible happenings in there.
But there was terror in the hotel.
Yes, there was, and that again brings us back to using pictures which are gory and not using them. So I think the headlines also can help tone down the feeling of horrible happenings. And personally, I liked the People's headline, Kenya Unbowed. Not that it changed anything, but it was a bit toned.
Where's our opportunity to then give details of what was actually happening as it emerges? Where's that opportunity?
Now that's again, there's a very thin line. I agree with you. It's really like, it's a thin line.
Right.
I think for a lot of international media, specifically, I want to talk about the BBC. They are very, very clear about live coverage because it's a developing story, and they are very clear about giving casualty figures and numbers because this is something that is evolving. And therefore, because in a live event, something can dramatically change. And as you rightly showed the clip here, when the public and everybody was going out there and there was a grenade that was found, suppose that grenade had exploded. So the numbers you are talking about, and even the extent of it, isn't it? And even the injured and what have you would have changed.
Okay.
And live on air then, right? You would have been then accused of perhaps distorting and not giving context. Remember the context of what is happening. And therefore, can the media in Kenya perhaps have a delay? And you remember.
But that's practice.
Right?
The delay is practice, but
yes,
maybe to take off.
The delay, whether then as matter of, again, standard practice, conduct, all right? Remember, it's live coverage. And therefore then, it's a very tight line. And I think that is now where then the issue of you understanding the power, the reach, the extent to which your coverage or reportage could cause the whole thing to go either way.
Either way. And in terms of playing to whichever narrative, the terrorist or the government.
Yes, no, my point number one is that I appreciate what we saw. There was a bit of emptiness in the live coverage. While we had cameras running, at some point for about 3 hours, there was nothing new. We just had the same thing happening all over again.
But then everyone is in competition to keep going.
Yes. I mean, they'll keep going with nothing. So you would watch your TV, go away for 30 minutes, come back. There is no new information. Ideally would be, I mean, go live when there is a new information. And that's what we have seen in other, well, say, media organizations. You go live for a while, you cover something else, and you go back live so that there is a new development, other than get us glued on the screen for 3 hours and there is nothing new that has happened. So there was a bit of emptiness in the live news coverage. So while it is an unfolding story, you should look for real, something new has developed and all that. That was lacking, and it's a bit about the quality of journalism, because while that was happening, I, for example, did not see an attempt of someone to find out all the ambulances going out where they were taking the injured and all that, so that we have another report at a hospital that has received 2 or 3 injured. And, to simply give the 2 hours some...
or perhaps you weren't watching NTV because we had that.
Yes.
But it's okay.
But that is, much later. There was a lot of emptiness in the many hours, yes.
Number two is that... On that point, is it more of the desire to get all the answers at one point, or indeed we're trying to get the answers? For instance, if you were to switch off and probably put some music channel, you would be accused of trying to tone down when you actually know the situation is bad. What are you hiding?
Yes.
We want to keep getting information. So even if it's a picture, live picture of that scene, keep rolling. Just show me. I just want to know, because in the absence of it, you're trying to show me something else, then you're hiding something. Don't you think that also is a reality?
Well, of course, it's a delicate balancing act and all that. But number two, to talk to the headlines the next day,
yes,
I have to appreciate that in terms of quality of journalism, we saw the national attempt because they spoke about inside the Hotel of Terror. That's trying to give details. Because I saw a paper trying to break news. It is 24 hours after it happened. You cannot say that terror in the city. Everybody knows there was terror in the city. Give us a few more details about the story after that. And number three, I wouldn't want to sing too much about the story of patriotism and all that, having already spoken about it, whatever the people did and all that. What people need the next morning is more detailed information. We saw a collection of the happenings and all that. The next morning we all buy papers to get a little more detailed and all that. And that is now the duty of the newspaper journalists, because we in TV and radio online, you struggle to break news in bits and pieces, and then that needs to break. So ideally, I say it is okay what the nation wrote and what the people wrote. It was entirely their choice. Just the problem is that, did you provide additional information, or you publish a newspaper 24 hours later to regurgitate what was put on radios, online, and TV the other day?
Speaking about live, by practice, is there a delay? Is that?
I think it is standard in the licenses issued by the Communications Authority. Having experienced the post-election violence in 2008, where media were accused of fanning ethnic animosity, it has been standard to have those delays. I know that these media houses have been here before and had a chat with the managing editor about certain delays, especially around political rallies, and there are specific people when they are going to the mic, there is always someone on the mixer to. So really, but then we have to say that really there wasn't anything extraordinary in this particular, apart from the depth and content really. But I think the delay is a requirement. Every media house has that requirement for a delay, so that in case anything happens that needs to be faded off for a while or pre-edited, that happens. And rarely do we have live images in many places across the world. It's not about gagging the media really. It's just that there are things you may not want to put live on screen.
And we'll clarify this on whether there needs to be a collaboration with the security forces and the media in the name of national security, in comparing with best practice or international practice, because we've had the 9/11 and people say not one body was seen in the coverage that was done, and there was wall-to-wall coverage, but not one body was seen. But let's look at the issue of the details and in-depth information that's given. And something we can't escape, and that's the numbers. Number of the terrorists and number of those dead and injured, and perhaps even those who are missing and who have been rescued. And we keep being accused of following these numbers, as sadists. But it's details that people want. But are we then playing to the narrative of the terrorist in terms of damage and extent? What do you think about that?
I think I have no problem with numbers being revealed. Really, that has to come out, because again, you can't keep silent about that. It's in order to just say about the numbers. It is in order to follow up and just continue finding out from government. Like initially I knew it was 14 people, but as days went by, I'm told it's 21. I don't know if that's the official number.
Official figure.
I think numbers help you know what happened and how bad it was, because when I look at what happened in Westgate, I think we lost 70. Garissa was even worse, 146. But this time, at least, they saved over 700 people. You feel that, yes, there was some work done which really alleviated the situation. Yes, numbers, I think, are important. Again, it's about giving information. You cannot leave it, blank like that, yeah.
But there's that issue of playing to the narrative of the terrorists. There's a message they want to put out.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would say, Mark, that in a terror event of that nature, numbers are important, but it's also the source.
Yes.
And it's very clear. And I think in journalism, you're told about the authority, the references, and the credibility of the source. So indeed, in a situation of a terror attack, you'll have to make a judgment. Now, do you want to believe Al-Shabaab or you want to believe the government of Kenya? And indeed, therefore, then if the government of Kenya says it's 21, would you want then, in terms of balancing a story, and I think this is now where the professional issues come to the fore, that you say the government of Kenya said it was 15 and Al-Shabaab said it is 90. And there is, indeed, you cannot get into that. You cannot allow yourself to do that. Therefore, you have to, what we call a judgment call. And in media, it's called the referencing, the authority, and what have you. Am I saying that the government cannot hide? Of course, they could try and play around. But I would rather that, on a situation that is evolving like that, you be very careful about numbers, because they could also change. Therefore, they could also be, indeed, 14, and then, as we were told that there were 96 people again missing, that is by the Red Cross, and then we were told the next day that all the missing people had counted for. So what we are saying then, in terms of the media covering a running, evolving, developing story, the need for the media to be professional, to be ethical, and very importantly, to know that they are not aiding the other side. And indeed, in the UK, in the European Union, and even in the US, the Patriotic Act, the Anti-Terrorism Act, and what have you, about media playing into the hands, justifying. And I think this is a very interesting, a grey area that the media then has to do, in my view then, has to make a judgment call. Do you believe Matiang'i or do you believe Al-Shabaab? And therefore, and if you do believe Al-Shabaab, do you also agree with their ideology? And indeed, are you part of that? Now, and I think that those are the very delicate issues about protocol then, the operating protocols within an event of that magnitude.
All right. Let me take a break at this point, and then we'll come back with Omoyo on what guides us with the details that people are still asking, and people are still searching for answers. I even say Ade numbers are still not out there. Is it our duty to continue following this, or in the name of patriotism, just, numb down on the numbers and cool off? And let's just keep on going with life, because that's the clarion call. Let's continue with life, because terrorists want us to live in a state of perpetual fear. But let's keep on going with life. But then there are answers that need to be given.
Very clear before you break. Media is allowed to disagree with government. Government, by its very purpose, will try to minimize information that goes out. And if, for example, government says 21, you may not have to ask Al-Shabaab. You could go to City Mortuary and check on their records and all that. And if you have different numbers, the media is allowed to do. And number two, it is very dangerous if the media in a country starts believing government blindly, because government, the work of government and any other institution or bureaucracy is to measure what information goes out. Media is supposed to verify that.
All right.
Yes, so as a point, yes, there's patriotism and all that. Don't trust those guys. Yes, don't trust those guys.
Trust those.
But also don't play.
Yes. If you don't trust government, don't go to ask Al-Shabaab. On the contrary, yes, verify.
So you must be able to play, as I say, it's a tight role you have to play there.
All right, then we'll look at what next in terms of training. We were told we'd get training after Westgate, and we didn't quite get it in terms of a calculated and planned, structured way. Let's see if this will happen, and if this will happen with the help of Media Council.
I know who is to blame.
Who is to blame? part of the show, and as she was following this, Linda Ogutu from KTN, she says, please tell Omoyo, because she heard you talk about what you said, empty, coverage. Please tell Omoyo that KTN News had Dr. Mercy Korir in 3 different hospitals, following up on the developments from there. So perhaps you weren't watching the right station. That's what she's saying. But as we continue with the conversation, because it's everyone's choice, whichever station you tune into, as long as you're getting the information you want, that's where you should tune into. And most of the time it's NTV, I'm just saying. But on the issue of government collaboration with media, in situations like these, there's sort of a mistrust between the institutions because, as you said earlier, don't trust these guys. They always want to control information. But in such a situation, what is working out there and what should we perhaps look at adopting?
To start with, the role of the media is to question and hold those in power to account. So the media has a role to verify. Okay. We have spoken even before, when you get a press statement from any person in authority, just verify the facts and the numbers down that. And I have to appreciate that the media in Kenya over the past few years has really become very strong and has questioned and really interrogated certain numbers and figures bandied around, and most of which would be a little exaggerated or, let's say, not very accurate. But number 2, in such situations, if you borrow from developed democracies, I will take an example of the United Kingdom, where we have an MOU between government or the security authorities and the media, that in a security situation, sometimes the media, in the rush to break news and all that, may compromise security operations. This is how we will work. The media has one condition, that there will be at least a regular brief. So the point is, you appreciate that you need to give security forces time to work, but they will provide regular updates. The same happens when we had a hotel attack in Sweden a while ago. There was no live reportage, and when the authorities...
By whose choice? Whose decision?
It is a decision between, it was an agreement between government and the media, that if you continue covering this while it's actively going on, it will compromise security. And over the next 14 days, when the government was following up the networks of the terrorists and all that, there were no updates on the media, because they agreed that if you keep disclosing where the next we are going and all that, you are like giving the guys we are following leads and all that. So it's really about compromise and all that. So you have to balance, number 1, that government has a duty to provide regular updates to the media, because then when you create a vacuum, then the media has a sacred duty to look for that information.
And then there's also social media that gets its message out there.
And that is what we must understand. If you are mainstream media, let social media be social media. Yes. You provide details and accuracy so that anybody in social media can break, isn't it? But let people know that has the mainstream media broken, because when the mainstream media runs an item, we are sure it has been verified and checked, all right? Okay. Social media, sometimes some of them are charlatans. They throw everything across. Let it be known.
But there's some really good information that's out
yes,
there.
But let it be known that everybody knows that there is something on social media. Let people know, and which websites do we trust if they run. So people say, for example, the Nation has not run it, so let's not believe it, and all that. I've seen all the bloggers with it, but the mainstream media has not done it. So but if a blogger breaks the news, and that has happened 3 times in the past few weeks, we're going to release a report, I think, next week. A blogger goes out, breaks news, and all the media houses run round with it. We have seen either people resigning or the Inspector General issuing statements and all that, which all turned out to be false. So, number 1, the work of the media is to verify. Okay. There are millions of people on Twitter and Facebook and wherever who will break news based on rumor and all that. But the serious consumer knows, after I have seen everybody making noise on social media, I am going to certain trusted pages and individuals to see whether they have broken it. Like I know when we saw the Inspector General issued a statement, I went to certain sources, I did not see the statement, and I knew this was false. But in a case where when I had by a rumor that someone had resigned, I went and found the media had fallen for a trick and ran it. So don't compete with social media. Yes. Okay. And one of the media, let me just mention them, BBC, Tony Ularibo is not here. They never rush for speed. But if something is on BBC, you are almost 90% sure it has happened. They don't rush to break news. They get to verify. So collaborate with government, especially in dangerous situations. You'll also need the police not just to give information, to protect just you if you got under...
That's very true. I mean, even Silas Apollos told me has newfound respect for the police officers.
Yes.
Given the
So
experience
that's
yes,
so collaborate with them.
It's about time.
But if at any time, don't only regurgitate government information, right? Verify. The whole issue is verify and fact check.
Okay.
But let this be principal information from there.
Do you fear of a scenario of media capture if we get too cozy in this collaboration in such situations?
No, and I would say this. I think, as my fellow panelist and from the Media Council is saying, I think the cardinal rule of journalism is you must be credible. I mean, you are credible because then you are professional in terms of sourcing, in terms of cross-referencing. And I think in very journalism 101, I think the first thing you are told is cross-check, verify, verify, and verify again.
Yes.
And then you are told, even though you are verifying, the sources must be credible and the sources must be authoritative and verifiable. However, and I think again, Mr. Omoyo is saying this, the Kenyan media has no business competing with the social media.
Okay.
Indeed, you cannot and you won't do that. And I don't think you've got the license to compete with the social media. You've gotten the license to provide people with credible information. Information that is reliable, information that has been cross-checked, and information that serves the public, and that, as again Omoyo is talking about, information that you can take to the bank. And if the nation is competing with what a certain blogger is talking or the Standard is doing that, then you have no business. Okay. And I think the international media right across has made that determination. Okay. We are not in the business of competing with social media. Right. The only thing we could do is to beat them by being credible because our sources, because there is no journalism is not social media. And I think that's why we go to school, my friend. Isn't that so?
Very true. Yeah.
So there was no point of us then going to school if then all we are doing is to what other little Harry somebody said, because we go to school to study journalism because news is sacred, facts are sacred, opinion, which is then being put on the social media,
yes,
is something else.
Okay.
So we are dealing with facts.
And just to put it out there before KOT starts attacking, he's not alluding or in any way insinuating that those on social media are not educated. He's just putting a point across in terms of the profession of journalism.
Yeah.
Yes.
My take on social media.
Yes.
Just like the two gentlemen are saying, yes, let them break the news, the social media, but let mainstream media do their part professionally. When I was growing up, the days when radio was radio, actually it was believable. If somebody asks you, who said? The radio said. I pray for a day when mainstream media will get back to that level where people will say, who said? Oh, it's Nation that said. So it's believable. But sometimes these days you find people questioning even mainstream media. They believe alternate media and they believe social media. So I think the mainstream media needs to reclaim its space and get back on track and do the right thing so that they inform correctly.
Let's talk to the issue of training because, again, I say, and this is unfortunate, after the Westgate attack, there was promise to get into training. We had the discussion here, and the training didn't happen, and it wasn't followed up, and we'll get to see who failed and how we can perhaps change that. And you speak to the issues that you are more concerned about. And John Otieno says, I saw a news anchor really was insisting to interview a survivor who was disturbed. Some emotional intelligence is still lacking. And yes, I don't know if you were watching me because I did speak to a survivor on Friday, but we ended the interview right after he broke down. But speak to this in terms of the training. What's available out there now that this is happening?
I think for us, I'll speak for women. I'll speak for, you have to allow me to speak for women.
Go ahead.
Yes, I speak for International Association of Women in Radio and Television. The association has put in place certain mechanisms to empower its members. We have a safety handbook known as What If. This is a safety handbook which advises women journalists on how to evade situations like this during that coverage, how to take care of themselves, what kind of questions to ask survivors. You know, women are more vulnerable, So at least they are informed on how to approach stories, on how to go about it. So actually,
it even has, you know, context and in environments of
even
terrorists.
culture. You need to know if you're going to an area, like if this thing happened in Mombasa, maybe for example, and you send a journalist maybe who is skimpily dressed. So you really need to take care of the way you are dressed, the way you are talking to the people. You need to understand the area you are covering. And so we normally advise women journalists to take a note of all those things so that their coverage is not compromised. So I think, yes, training needs to happen. Training didn't happen in large scale, but as women journalists, we do empower each other. We exchange notes and we keep giving support to other women journalists.
And this is available where?
It is available. Actually, it is a soft copy. I have sent it to you. It's non-safety. It's called What If. It's IWAT safety manual. Yeah.
And I'll post that.
Yes,
you know, some other document was promised to me not too long ago, and Kenyans really followed up on this. So I hope you've sent it so I can post it on my account.
Yes, I've sent it.
People really do follow on this. Gashia, what are you doing for the boy child? She's doing a lot for the girl child in the newsroom.
Yes.
You're a security analyst.
Mark, I would say this. Training of journalists in terms of safety and in terms of protection has been what we call the new fad. And I think almost everybody you're talking about saying they have a training for this, they have a training for this. The bigger question is, has it been effective? And has it been, shall I say, internalized? And I think the Media Council and I and with you know a number of international organizations, including HIVOS, Doshowele, Article 19 and what have you, we've carried out a series of trainings. The question is they must be followed up and what have you. And the bigger issue was that the understanding was that the media houses in this country were also internally going to carry out what we'd call creating a protocol, a standard operating procedure, in that once they have new journalists, there are again taken through very basic training on a terrorist attack, a disaster, an epidemic, and what have you. Now, and the Media Council really has the obligation, and I think the mandate, to coordinate that training. The problem is we're having a lot of duplication, and we have a manual. Indeed, we have a manual, we have a protocol. Was that protocol then accepted? Was it internalized within the nation, the Standard Media Group, whatever? I doubt that happened. But I think perhaps Bwana Omoyo here, whose mandate it is then to try and ensure that these things happen in terms of issuing licenses for nation broadcasters and what have you. Do you hold them to account? I mean, sorry, I'm now taking Mark's
No,
position.
it's okay. It's okay. He's failed in his job, so he needs to account for it.
We have the Handbook on Reporting Terrorism, published by the Media Council in 2016, and a training or two were done. What we need to do is refresher courses and continuous training, because if you train people that time, then people have left newsrooms, going to other media houses, we have no specialization.
And we have new recruiters.
So we need to get a selection of courses, then we continuously train people. Secondly is that we are not very sure about specialization, because if we have, I know that the newsrooms have the specializations, but they're not as elaborate as they were before, where you knew that we have a desk and specialities in terrorism and crime and all that. Guys who undergo regular training, they have the equipment. Sometimes we even go through dry runs from time to time. I don't think we are very effective in that. So we have are general beat reporters who are in an accident scene, in a robbery, then there is a medical report, then there's a farmer's report and all that. The same person going around. We need to, perhaps that's and master of none.
Yes.
We need to get specializations and all that. Thirdly, and I have to admit that we have had a discussion with the Cabinet Secretary Interior twice before about a discussion with media about how to report certain things and when we can agree to disagree. The whole idea, it was very honest that we will have to agree how we will handle certain situations and when we agree to disagree.
Yes.
And really, The Media Council should have followed that, and I undertake to follow up with him, because we agree that the media can only agree up to a certain level.
Yes.
You must not then entirely gag them. You must let the media go its way. At least I think we need to get a certain arrangement around that. This was coming up from when we had the debacle at the airport, when some people were not boarding. And we said, if we have the media and if we have the media and security forces just seeing each other there, they have had no collaboration, there's no communication line, that causes too much conflict. But we have a working relationship and all that, we can have a certain communication. Guys, please wait for us here, we'll come back after 30 minutes and all that. But when we meet, the interaction between a journalist and a policeman is at an accident scene or such a scene, then there's a lot of that. So really we should have followed up that.
Okay.
So I think broadly is that we have the handbook, but we need to have closer collaboration and discussions, and especially a lot of training. Now we are going to follow up that a lot. And also state further that we have had even a discussion before about an MOU, a UK-style MOU. It's just a shared code that then determines how do we relate. Because we are going, the media and the police are going into an active scene where we have terrorism and all that. There must be at what point do we relate and all that. Those are about 3 areas that we must actively follow up while it's still out, because then we have the tendency to be very excited about something and then forget about it. We are going to, I undertake that we're going to do that. Hold me to account next time I come here.
We'll hold you to that. We'll hold you to that. Just before that, because I'll give you your closing remarks, but I have to do this. This is an international story that I'm sure you followed, and you have probably 1 or 2 things to say. It was very sad. It happened to the body of journalists worldwide, to be honest, but it was specifically in Ghana. Large crowds attended the burial of Ahmed Hussein Swale on Friday, a Ghanaian investigative journalist who helped uncover corruption in the soccer world. Ahmed was shot dead on Wednesday, the 16th of January, actually just a day after the attack here. The investigative journalist was part of a team led by well-known undercover journalist Anas. This team created a well-known documentary that accused 77 referees and Ghana's then soccer chief Kwesi Nyantakyi of taking bribes. Let's have a look.
Ahmed Hussein Swale is said to have been shot 3 times by men on a motorbike while driving home from work in the capital Accra. This according to his production company Tiger Eye PI. The Tiger Eye team has cultivated many enemies over the years due to their sting operations, which some describe as entrapment, breach of privacy and unethical journalism. They have used hidden body cameras to expose high court judges who take bribes, fake abortion doctors in Nigeria and a Chinese sex trafficking ring in Accra. As an undercover investigator, Hussein Swale was unknown to the general public until his work in exposing football corruption in Ghana and Africa in a film released in June 2018. Kennedy Agyapong, a controversial member of parliament who was also implicated in the film, got hold of Hussein Swale's passport and photos and blew his cover on national television while encouraging his supporters to attack the reporter. His identity exposed, Hussein Swale told the Committee to Protect Journalists CPJ in September he had received death threats and he feared for his life. On social media, Anas suggested his colleague had been assassinated, linking the killing to his work as a journalist. Hussein Swale's last known undercover investigation was into ritual killings in Malawi, published by the BBC, in which he, Anas and the television crew were attacked by villagers who mistook them for ritual killers themselves. The investigative journalist killing came as a shock in Ghana, whose vibrant press enjoys relative freedom compared to many African nations. Ghana is ranked 23rd out of 180 countries in a World Press Freedom Index. Ghana is ranked 23rd out of 180 countries in a World Press Freedom Index compiled by Paris-based Reporters Without Borders, which is Africa's highest ranking.
Ahmed, may he rest in peace, and Anas and the team there say they are not going to be cowed and continue with their journalistic work investigating issues in Ghana and in the continent. Indeed, in fact, that story even touched on one of Kenya's referees who got disqualified for being part of this corruption ring. Now, just a comment to this as well as this is concluding remarks. Eddie Mwangi says, what action will the Media Council take against the New York Times and the journalists that took the disturbing photos? Will feel this amounts to anything or the traditional verbal statement threats, it is clear foreign media has malicious disregard for Kenyan laws, in his view.
Yes, before I come that, I want to comment about the threats to international journalists, is that journalism is the art of publishing, or rather broadcasting, what someone does not want published. You will definitely be threatened, either locally or internationally. And that's why we say journalism is a religion. You must be committed to the truth and human rights. Otherwise, if you're in journalism to please certain people, you're just doing PR. And so any journalist must know that their life will be threatened, but they just have to be bold and daring to do your work. Number two is that as you speak about what we will do with the New York Times, it's entirely a legal process.
Yes.
Let me explain how it works. International, we have no jurisdiction over international media, but we license, or the bureau house here, and all the journalists working locally. Sorry, and as they get their press card, they sign and abide to follow the code of conduct. And so we have an entire set of regulations, suspension, a fine, or even a withdrawal of that. But most important is that we should not exaggerate the matter and play victim unnecessarily. This has been really a moral issue. Don't publish photos of victims even while the attack is ongoing and you're affecting grieving families. It's an international standard for journalism to respect the grieving or the dead, and that's all we've done, especially if the photos are not adding any additional information to a story. So an assurance that we are not threatening international media, we are not threatening to shut down or chase away anybody, but at least the code of conduct for the practice of journalism in Kenya, which is basically the law of the land, has to be followed by anybody who wants to practice journalism in Kenya. Don't play victim, don't try to look for sympathy and all that. Just abide by the law, and we have no intention to gag any media. We talk about the Media Council promoting press freedom and responsible journalism. Right. When we ask for responsibility, we are not threatening press freedom. We are simply asking the guys who have been now protected by the Constitution to be responsible and reasonable to their subjects.
All right. Bwana Gashia, someone says they are not content with how you responded, perhaps the issues or concerns on how journalists were following security forces in the live attack scene. But as you conclude, real quick.
Yes. I would say that it is important that journalists must be able to follow and indeed cover an evolving event. But perhaps in context is to say journalism is one of the most dangerous careers. Perhaps is the fifth, if not the fourth. And in line of hierarchy in terms of most dangerous is, of course, the military and the security. Then we have the aviation. Then we have the medical. Then we have the rescue and disaster response teams. And then we have journalism. The problem is that in all these other 5 careers, they do have protocols about their safety. They do not, as it were, take their safety for granted because they know where they are going to and what they're supposed to do. And indeed, in aviation, the military, the medical, and even the response, you will notice that they have very particular protocol as to what they will do at a particular time and what have you. But they have no control over disaster, indeed. Now, the strange thing is that journalists who are supposed to cover and bring this, as it were, they rarely have a protocol themselves. They do not. And they don't take their training very seriously. And you see now where the correlation here. Yes. And therefore, when journalists are going to cover an event of this particular magnitude, or a disaster, or an earthquake, or what have you, they must, as a matter of fact, also remember that they could be victims.
Yes.
And that's also remember they need to be safe for them to be able to give us this. And again, further afield, if there is an ongoing military scene, like what was happening in Westgate or in Garissa or even at the Dusit here, there are certain areas due to operational concerns that the media cannot and ought not to unless they have collaboration. So it's a collaborative effort. Okay. And therefore, journalists must, as a matter of fact, take their safety as a matter of life and death. They cannot. They're not superhuman. Apollo found that. And as you said, once he got out, What did he tell you?
He has newfound respect.
He has a newfound respect for security, because for the first time in his life, he realized this could have gone the other way. All right?
Yes.
And I think, so could I. I have covered wars in Afghanistan, in South Sudan, in Namibia, and what have you, and in Israel, and in Afghanistan. One of the things you do not do, journalist is not a superhuman. Do you understand? And your responsibility is yours. You own it.
All right, let's end at that. And last word to Josephine Karani.
Yes, thank you so much, Mark. Yeah, indeed, we've made some gains with coverage this time round. And going forward with training, with the collaboration with government, with security forces, I think the coverage will be better, will be more informative, will not infringe the citizens' lives and all that kind of thing. And I also wanted to bring in the other aspect of who covers such events. Like, do we have specific journalists who go for these events? How do newsrooms send out reporters?
To be honest, it was who was available.
Whoever is available at the time of the happening. It can be a man or a woman.
To be honest.
Yes, because I saw people challenging and saying, where is the gender balance this time? They were claiming that there were no women, which was not fair, I think. I saw several ladies reporting from hospitals, reporting from the ground. And I think also there needs to be respect for the female gender. They are equally professionals. They should be given a chance to be able to report on such issues. So really, for me, we can do more. We did better this time. And I believe going forward with training, with more information, we can inform the publics better.
All right. Josephine Karani from the International Association of Women in Radio and Television, thank you for your input and for coming on Press Pass. John Garcia, you're always welcome, of course, again to the show. Thank you for your time, sir. And also, Bwana Omoyo will hold you accountable to this issue of training and on what will become of the case that is with you right now, with your office. And then to you as a viewer, thank you for watching. Thank you to those who are behind the scenes in making this set possible, this whole show possible. And yes, Oladipo, thank you for being willing to come. It wasn't your last say on not coming, but I appreciate that you wanted to come. Also, Kimiko from the New York Times. The story continues. As you very well know, Omoyo says this continues, and he's not trying to gag your freedom as New York Times. It's just one or two issues that they need to clarify. Thank you for watching. I'm Mark Masai. Have a good night.